Her Grace has no further purpose at Blackmoor. A wife who cannot give the Duke an heir cannot expect to keep her place forever. The announcement rang across the assembly room before Clara had reached the bottom of the staircase. More than 200 guests stood beneath the chandeliers of Blackmoor House. 6 noble families had brought their unmarried daughters, each dressed as though she had already been promised a coronet. Clara stopped beside the final stair. At the centre of the room stood her husband, Nathaniel, Duke of Blackmoor. He wore the same black evening coat he had worn when their son was baptized 3 years earlier. The child had been declared dead before sunrise. Clara had never been permitted to see his body. "Is this truly necessary?" she asked. Nathaniel looked at her but did not step forward. "My family requires an heir. You already made that argument in private. You refused to accept it. I refuse to confess to a failure that may not be mine." A murmur moved through the guests. Lady Margaret Wycliffe, the beautiful daughter of Nathaniel's most powerful political ally, approached him with a glass of champagne. The Duke could have ended the spectacle with a single word. Instead, he accepted the glass. Clara felt something inside her become very still. Only that morning, Nathaniel had promised that no decision would be announced before his physician reviewed the records of her confinement. Now the physician stood beside Lady Margaret's father, refusing to meet Clara's eyes. "Will you send me away tonight?" Clara asked. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the glass. "You will retain a residence and an allowance until the separation terms are settled. And my work at the tenants' school? Lady Margaret will assume its patronage." Several women smiled. Clara had spent 4 years building that school. Using the bookkeeping knowledge her merchant father had taught her, enrollment had doubled. Winter deaths among the tenants' children had fallen. Nathaniel had once called it the finest achievement of his estate. Now he was handing it to a woman who had never crossed the village bridge. Clara removed the Blackmoor emerald from her bodice and placed it upon a silver tray. "If Lady Margaret wants my chair, she may have it," she said, "but she will not take credit for the people I kept alive." Nathaniel flinched, although his voice remained cold. "Do not make this uglier than it must be." Clara almost laughed. Before she could answer, a heavy crash sounded near the entrance. An elderly woman had fallen against the marble floor. Her battered travelling chest lay on its side, and several medicine bottles rolled beneath the guests' shoes. No servant moved to help her. Lady Margaret glanced toward the disturbance and sighed. Must these people always arrive through the wrong door? The old woman tried to stand, but her knees failed beneath her. One of the young ladies, competing for Nathaniel's attention, stepped over the woman's outstretched hand. Clara crossed the room. "Your Grace," Nathaniel warned. She ignored him. The woman's coat was damp, her face feverishly pale. Clara knelt and gathered the scattered bottles before someone crushed them. "You are unwell," she said. "Did you come alone?" "I came for you." The woman's answer was little more than a breath. Clara slipped an arm around her shoulders. "We have never met." The stranger stared at Clara with faded blue eyes. "Oh, but I know you." 2 footmen hurried forward, though their concern appeared directed at the guests rather than the injured woman. "Remove her," Lady Margaret ordered. "Her Grace's final evening should not be spoiled by a beggar." Clara rose slowly. "Bring food, hot water, and a physician." Neither footman obeyed. They looked toward Nathaniel. Clara followed their gaze. Household authority had already been taken from her, even before the announcement was complete. Nathaniel hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the public rejection. "Take the woman to the servants' hall," he finally said. "No." Clara tightened her hold around the stranger. "She will be taken to my sitting room. That room no longer belongs to you." The words silenced the assembly. Clara's face burned, but she would not give Lady Margaret the pleasure of seeing her break. "Then I shall help her outside." She collected the medicine bottles and lifted one end of the battered chest. It was unexpectedly heavy. A quiet voice came from behind her. "I will carry the other side." Thomas Hale, the young village schoolmaster, had entered with a group of tenants, invited to present Clara with a letter of gratitude. He looked from the abandoned emerald to the noblewomen surrounding the Duke, and understood enough to say nothing more. Together, he and Clara carried the chest into the entrance passage. The old woman leaned heavily upon Clara until the assembly room doors closed behind them. Then her weakness vanished. She straightened and seized Clara's wrist. "You have lost everything because of me." Clara pulled back. "What are you talking about?" The woman glanced toward Thomas, before drawing a small iron key from her sleeve. "Lock the door." Thomas obeyed. The stranger opened the chest, just wide enough for Clara to see dozens of parish registers and sealed baptism records arranged beneath a false layer of clothing. Every document bore the Blackmoor crest. Clara's heart began to pound. "These belong in the estate archive." "They did," the woman replied, "until someone ordered them destroyed." She withdrew one yellowed record and placed it in Clara's hands. The ink listed the date of Clara's confinement, the name of the attending physician, and the baptism of a living male child. Clara could barely breathe as she read the final line. "William Nathaniel Blackmoor, lawful son and heir." "No," Clara whispered. "My son died." The old woman closed her fingers around Clara's hand. "That is what they paid me to tell you." A key turned in the assembly room doors behind them. The elderly woman slammed the chest shut. "If the Duke's men find these records," she whispered, "you will lose your son a second time." The key stopped turning. Thomas extinguished the nearest lamp and pulled the old woman behind the open door. Clara lowered the false layer of clothing over the baptism records, but there was no time to lock the chest. The door swung inward. Nathaniel entered alone. His gaze moved from Clara to Thomas, then settled upon the travelling chest between them. "What is happening here?" "The woman requires medical attention," Clara answered. "You locked the door to provide it." "I locked the door because your guests were staring." Nathaniel looked toward the old woman. She had resumed her stooped posture, but Clara noticed that one hand remained hidden inside her coat. "Who are you?" he demanded. "A woman your family hoped never to see again." Clara stepped between them before the stranger could say more. "She is feverish." "She did not appear feverish when I entered." "Perhaps humiliation has sharpened your medical judgment." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Thomas moved closer to the chest. The Duke noticed. "What is inside that?" "My belongings," the woman replied. "Open it." "No." The answer came without fear. Nathaniel stared at her as though no common woman had ever refused him before. "You entered my house without an invitation. I was invited 29 years ago." Something changed in Nathaniel's expression. The old woman drew a worn medallion from beneath her coat. Clara saw an image of St. Margaret on one side and the Blackmoor crest on the other. Nathaniel took a step forward. "Where did you get that?" "From your mother." "My mother died when I was 6. "Yes," the stranger said. "And she died, regretting what this family had forced her to do." Footsteps approached from the assembly room. Lady Margaret's voice floated through the doorway. "Nathaniel, Lord Wycliffe is waiting." The old woman flinched at the name. Clara saw it. Nathaniel did not. He turned toward the passage. "Return to the guests," Clara said. "You have 6 noble families waiting to inspect you. This is not a game." "No. It became something far uglier when you offered my position as a prize." His eyes returned to her face. For one suspended moment, the cold certainty left him. Clara saw the man who had once sat beside her through an entire winter night, while she calculated how many sacks of grain were needed to keep the northern tenants alive. Then Lady Margaret appeared in the doorway. She stopped when she saw Thomas. "What is the schoolmaster doing here?" "He helped an injured woman," Clara answered. "How admirable, yet hardly appropriate company for a duchess." "You appear confused, Lady Margaret. I was just informed that I am no longer considered one." Margaret's smile thinned. "Nathaniel, my father believes the announcement should continue. Several guests are already asking whether the separation has received ecclesiastical approval." "It has not," Clara said. Margaret looked at her. "The Duke's solicitor assured us." "The Duke's solicitor may negotiate a private separation," Clara interrupted. "He cannot make a lawful wife disappear because a prettier candidate has arrived." Nathaniel's face hardened. "You will not discuss private legal matters with my guests. You made them public when you invited half of London to witness my replacement." The old woman's fingers tightened around Clara's sleeve. Lord Wycliffe's name had frightened her. Margaret's mention of the solicitor had done something worse. She was trembling again, and this time it was not an act. Clara made her decision. "Thomas, take this woman to the village school." Nathaniel blocked the doorway. "She is not leaving with that chest. Then she remains under my protection. You no longer hold authority in this house." "Perhaps not, but you have not yet taken my conscience." Margaret gave a soft, amused laugh. "Always so dramatic." Clara turned toward her. 3 winters ago, The northern tenants owed this estate nearly £4,000. Your father advised his grace to evict 26 families and lease the land to a commercial breeder. Margaret's amusement vanished. I reorganized the rents, Clara continued. I found that the steward had charged widows for repairs never completed. I opened the school so their children could keep production accounts and avoid signing contracts they could not read. Within 18 months, the debt was reduced by half. Nathaniel watched her without speaking. The school belongs to Blackmoor, Margaret said. The building does, Clara replied. The books, teachers' wages and winter fund were purchased through the trust established in my marriage settlement. If you assume its patronage, you assume its accounts as well. I am perfectly capable of managing accounts. Then tell me how much coal the school requires for 1 week. Margaret glanced at Nathaniel. Clara waited. No answer came. 2,800 weight, Thomas said quietly. 32 during a frost. Clara nodded. And there are 43 children whose evening meals depend upon that kitchen. Close it for 1 week while you redecorate, Lady Margaret, and some of them will not survive the cold. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. For the first time that evening, the guests in the adjoining room were silent enough to hear every word. Clara faced her husband. I will leave your private rooms. I will surrender your jewels, but I will not sign away the school, and I will not leave Blackmoor until I know whether my son is alive. Nathaniel went completely still. Margaret looked from him to Clara. What son? The old woman suddenly swayed. Thomas caught her before she struck the floor. A folded paper slipped from her coat. Nathaniel bent and picked it up. Clara recognized the Blackmoor crest before he unfolded it. The paper was not another baptism record. It was a payment order. Nathaniel read the amount twice. £200, he said. Paid to Mrs. Miriam Bell, 3 days after my son's death. The old woman raised her head. My name is Miriam Bell. Nathaniel's voice became dangerously quiet. What service did my family purchase from you? Miriam looked at Clara rather than the Duke. My silence. Lady Margaret stepped backward. It was only half a step, but Clara noticed. So did Thomas. Nathaniel did not. He was staring at the signature beneath the payment order. Clara moved beside him. The signature belonged to his former steward, a man dismissed shortly after the child's funeral. Yet the payment had been authorized, with the private seal kept inside Nathaniel's father's study. Nathaniel folded the paper. This proves someone paid you. It does not prove my son survived. The baptism record does, Clara said. Miriam seized her hand. Not here. Nathaniel heard her. His gaze shifted toward the chest. Clara placed herself in front of it. You burned the physician's report without reading it this morning. You will not touch these records until they are examined by someone who does not depend upon your favor. I am the child's father, and I am his mother. Nathaniel recoiled as if she had struck him. Clara did not soften. For 3 years you allowed me to believe I had failed you. Tonight, you offered my place to strangers before investigating a single contradiction. You no longer have the right to decide which evidence deserves to survive. A bell rang from the courtyard, not the polished bell used by arriving guests. The iron alarm bell above the estate archive. Thomas crossed to the window. Orange light rose beyond the eastern wing. The archive is burning. Miriam clutched the chest with both hands. They know I brought the registers. Nathaniel ran toward the door, shouting for servants. Clara looked down at the payment order, still clenched in his hand. The corner had torn when he folded it. Beneath the visible authorization was a second line of ink, written in a different hand. She caught his wrist before he could leave. There is another name. Nathaniel opened the paper. At the bottom of the order, barely visible beneath the broken wax, were 4 words. Payment witnessed by Lord Wycliffe. Margaret disappeared from the doorway. A carriage thundered away across the courtyard. Then the old woman whispered the words that stopped Clara from following her. The child was not taken from Blackmoor. Clara turned. Miriam's face had become colourless. He is still somewhere on this estate. Nathaniel stared at Miriam. Where? I do not know the room, she replied. Only that the child never passed through the eastern gate. You expect me to believe my son has lived somewhere on Blackmoor land for 3 years? I expect nothing from you, your grace. I came for his mother. Another alarm bell rang. Thomas opened the window. Smoke rolled above the eastern roofs, and servants were running toward the archive with buckets. Clara looked at the chest. If the fire had been started to destroy the estate records, then whoever lit it knew Miriam had returned. They might also know which documents she carried. "Take her to the school," Clara told Thomas. "Use the kitchen path. Do not stop for anyone. I will not leave you here." That was not a request. Thomas hesitated, then lifted one end of the chest. Miriam caught Clara's hand. The boy had a crescent-shaped mark beneath his left shoulder. Clara's breath failed. She had seen that mark when the midwife placed her child against her chest for a few precious seconds after his birth. Nathaniel had never seen it. Dr. Morrow had carried the infant away before Nathaniel entered the room. Clara bent toward Miriam. "Who took him?" "Your husband's former steward arranged the carriage, but the carriage returned empty before dawn." "Why did you remain silent?" Miriam's face crumpled. "They threatened my daughter. They said they would send her to prison for stealing medicine from the infirmary. And the money? I never spent it. I kept the payment order because I knew fear would not excuse me forever." Clara wanted to hate her. Instead, she saw an old woman who had carried 3 years of shame across miles of winter road to place the truth in her hands. "Go with Thomas." Miriam nodded. Nathaniel stepped aside, but his voice stopped them. "If you are lying," Clara turned on him. She helped a woman who had just been publicly discarded. What advantage could she possibly expect from that? Nathaniel had no answer. Thomas and Miriam disappeared through the servants' passage with the chest. Clara ran toward the courtyard. Flames had already consumed 2 windows of the estate archive. Servants formed an uneven line from the courtyard pump, passing buckets toward the entrance. Nathaniel seized one from a footman and threw the water across the burning door. "The ledgers are in the western room," he shouted. "The school records are in the north cabinet," Clara said. Nathaniel caught her arm. "You are not entering that building. You just told 200 people that they no longer concern me. You cannot rediscover your authority because the roof is burning. This is not about authority. Then release me." A beam crashed behind the upper windows. Nathaniel's grip loosened. Clara pulled free and ran toward the side entrance. She knew the archive better than most of the servants because she had spent 2 winters comparing rent rolls against grain deliveries. The north door was locked. She reached beneath a loose stone beside the drainpipe and retrieved the spare key she had ordered, placed there after a clerk was trapped during a flood. Nathaniel stared at it. "You kept a key outside." "I prepared for an emergency. There is a difference." She opened the door. Smoke swallowed the corridor. Nathaniel followed her before she could forbid it. They covered their mouths and entered together. The fire had begun near the shelves containing birth, death, and employment records. The rent ledgers on the opposite wall remained untouched. "This was deliberate," Clara said. "Save your breath." A burning strip of curtain fell between them. Nathaniel kicked it aside. Clara reached the north cabinet and pulled open the first drawer. School enrollment books lay inside, along with meal accounts and medical notes for the tenants' children. She gathered as many as she could carry. Nathaniel dragged a wooden box from the lower shelf. "What is this?" "Winter attendance tallies. We do not have time for them. Every child receiving food from the school is listed there." He looked at the flames moving along the ceiling. "Leave it." Clara tightened her arms around the books. "If my son has been hidden among the tenants, his false name may be in that box." Nathaniel lifted it. They ran. The ceiling collapsed seconds after they reached the courtyard. Clara fell to her knees, coughing. Nathaniel placed the box beside her and bent forward with his hands braced against his thighs. For several moments neither spoke. Then Clara noticed something attached to his sleeve. A small brass disc had caught in the fabric. She pulled it free. The disc was no larger than a coin. A number had been stamped on one side. 44. Nathaniel looked toward the rescued enrollment books. "You said there were 43 children." "There are." "Then what is that?" Clara turned the disc over. The other side bore the initials W.B. William Blackmoor. Her fingers began to shake. "No," Nathaniel said immediately. "Those initials could belong to anyone." "And the number?" "A clerical error. You would rather believe in an extra child than your own son. I would rather have proof before allowing you to build hope upon a piece of brass." Clara closed her fist around the tally. "You required no proof before declaring me barren." The words struck him into silence. A carriage entered the courtyard. Lady Margaret stepped down. She had changed neither her gown nor her expression of injured innocence. My carriage was sent to fetch Dr. Morrow, she explained. Why is everyone staring at me? Clara rose. We heard it leave immediately after your father's name appeared on Miriam's payment order. Margaret looked toward Nathaniel. I sent my driver because the old woman was ill. You did not know her name, Clara said. Margaret's eyes flickered. Only once. But Clara saw it. She introduced herself in the passage, Margaret replied. No, she gave her name after you had already left the doorway. Nathaniel looked between them. Margaret recovered quickly. Then I must have heard one of the servants mention it. The servants were fighting a fire. Dr. Morrow emerged from the carriage before she could answer. He was a narrow man with silver spectacles and a black medical case. Clara remembered those hands carrying her newborn son away. Where is the patient? He asked. At the village school, Margaret said. Clara had never told her where Miriam was being taken. Nathaniel noticed this contradiction. His eyes narrowed, but Lord Wycliffe appeared behind the physician before he could question it. My daughter sent for us when she saw the flames, Wycliffe said. Thank God the Duke is unharmed. He placed a reassuring hand upon Nathaniel's shoulder. Nathaniel allowed it. Clara felt the fragile opening close. Wycliffe had guided Nathaniel through his father's death, secured his seat in Parliament, and rescued Blackmoor from a disputed debt. Nathaniel trusted him with the loyalty of a son. It was precisely why Lord Wycliffe had been able to witness the payment without being questioned. Dr. Morrow glanced at the books near Clara's feet. What did you recover? School records, she answered. Hardly worth risking your life. Clara held up the brass tally. Was there a 44th child? The physician's face remained calm. His hand did not. It tightened around the handle of his medical case. Lord Wycliffe stepped between them. Your Grace, your wife, has endured a great shock. She should be given something to help her sleep. The same words had been spoken after Clara's confinement. She remembered the bitter medicine, the locked curtains, and the endless days in which every question had been dismissed as grief. No medicine, Clara said. Nathaniel rubbed the soot from his face. Clara, no one appointed by Lord Wycliffe will touch me or Miriam. You are not in a position to issue commands. Then consider it my first condition. For what? For my silence. The courtyard became still. Clara raised her voice so the servants, tenants, and remaining guests could hear. If the boy named in that baptism record is found alive, then your announcement tonight was not merely cruel. It was built upon a crime committed inside this household. Lord Wycliffe's expression changed. Not to fear, to calculation. Clara recognized the moment he stopped seeing her as a grieving wife and began seeing her as a threat. He turned toward Nathaniel. The old woman has infected her Grace with a dangerous delusion. For Clara's protection, she must be confined to her rooms until a physician examines her. Nathaniel looked at Clara. This was another moment in which he could choose to listen. Dr. Morrow opened his medical case. Inside lay a prepared syringe and a bottle bearing the same red label as the medicine Clara had been forced to drink after childbirth. She pointed toward it. That is not a sleeping draught. Dr. Morrow closed the case. Nathaniel's gaze fell upon the red label. He had seen those bottles before. Clara knew it from his face. Yet when Lord Wycliffe quietly said, "You must control your household," Nathaniel looked toward the watching guests. His fear of scandal defeated his doubt. "Take Clara to her rooms," he ordered. 2 footmen approached. Clara stepped back, still holding the brass tally. Then the school bell began ringing beyond the southern wall. Once, twice, 3 times the signal Thomas used when a child was missing. A young kitchen maid ran into the courtyard, breathless and terrified. "Your Grace," someone broke into the school. Clara seized the girl's shoulders. "Where are Thomas and Mrs. Bell? The schoolmaster is injured. The old woman is gone. And the chest?" The maid began to cry. "They took it." Clara looked at the brass disc in her palm. The records were gone, but the person who had searched the school had overlooked one fact. The 44th child had been counted in her own accounts for 3 years. And unlike Nathaniel, Clara remembered every unexplained loaf of bread. Nathaniel caught Clara's arm before she could run. "You are going to your rooms. Thomas may be dying. Dr. Morrow will attend him." Clara looked at the red-labelled bottle inside the physician's case. "No." Lord Wycliffe stepped closer. "You are overwrought, Duchess, and you are standing beside a burning archive while the woman named on your payment order is being abducted. That order is 3 years old. Then you have had 3 years to prepare an explanation. Wycliffe's face remained composed, but the muscles beside his mouth tightened. Clara turned to Nathaniel. If you can find me now, every servant in this courtyard will know you chose Lord Wycliffe's reputation over the life of your own son. Nathaniel glanced at the watching household. Clara hated that public pressure moved him when her private grief had not. 4 footmen will accompany us, he said. You will remain beside me. No physician appointed by Wycliffe enters the school. Clara, that is my condition. You have no authority to impose one. Then arrest me here and explain why your schoolmaster was attacked immediately after carrying evidence away from this house. Nathaniel released her. Dr. Morrow remains outside. Lord Wycliffe objected. Nathaniel raised one soot-blackened hand. For once, you will allow me to investigate before deciding what I must believe. Clara heard the weakness in the promise. For once, not because she deserved the truth, but because the scandal had become too large to ignore. Still, it was enough to get them through the southern gate. Thomas lay beside the schoolroom stove, with blood running from a wound above his ear. The kitchen maid had pressed a folded apron against it. Broken chairs blocked the passage, and the food cupboard stood open. Clara knelt beside him. Thomas, can you hear me? His eyes opened. They wore servants' coats. How many? 2, perhaps 3. Where is Miriam? They dragged her through the rear door. Nathaniel crouched on the other side of him. Did you recognize them? Thomas tried to sit up. Pain forced him down again. One had a scar across his right hand. I saw it when he struck me. Lord Wycliffe entered behind the footman. Clara looked at his hands. Both were gloved. You were told to remain outside, she said. I came to protect the Duke. From an injured schoolmaster. From whatever story you intend to build around him. Thomas's breathing changed. Clara saw fear enter his face when Wycliffe spoke. She shifted, so her body blocked the older man from view. Thomas, where did they take the chest? I heard wheels, near the kitchen yard. The Eastern Road? Nathaniel asked. Thomas shook his head. No carriage passed the front windows. Clara looked toward the food cupboard. Its shelves had been emptied onto the floor, but the attackers had ignored the children's copybooks and the locked cabinet containing donated coins. They were not searching for money, she said. They wanted the records. We already knew that, Nathaniel replied. No. They wanted more than Miriam's chest. Clara crossed to the kitchen. Flour covered the floor where someone had overturned a storage barrel. 43 wooden bowls remained stacked beside the stove. On the draining board sat another bowl. The 44th. Clara picked it up. Unlike the others, it had no child's name carved into its rim. Nathaniel followed her. A spare bowl proves nothing. It was used today. A streak of porridge remained along the bottom. Clara called to the kitchen maid. Who ate from this? 10. The girl looked toward Lord Wycliffe. I do not know, Your Grace. You will not be punished. I truly do not know. The bowl is always placed beside the rear door after breakfast. Who places it there? Mrs. Fletcher did before she died. Now I do. And who collects it? I have never seen. Lord Wycliffe gave a dismissive laugh. Food left for a stray animal is hardly evidence of an heir. Clara ignored him. How much food is placed in it? 1 child's portion, porridge in the morning, bread and stew at noon. For how long? Since I began working here 2 years ago. Nathaniel's expression shifted. The girl continued. Mrs. Fletcher told me it was an old Blackmoor custom. She said the account must always show 44 portions, even if only 43 children attended. Clara closed her eyes. She remembered questioning the excess flour during her first audit. The former cook had blamed mice. Clara had ordered metal barrels, but the food discrepancy had continued. She had assumed the kitchen staff were secretly feeding a hungry tenant and had chosen not to investigate further. Her kindness had preserved the hidden ration. Her failure to ask one more question had left her son concealed within reach. Where are the kitchen accounts? She asked. The maid pointed toward the overturned table. They took the ledger. Clara moved to the wall beside the stove. What are you doing? Nathaniel asked. Looking for the copy. What copy? The one I require for every account involving food or medicine. She ran her fingers beneath a narrow shelf and found the concealed latch. A shallow compartment opened inside the wall. Thomas had helped her build it after grain figures were altered during her first winter at Blackmoor. Only Clara, the schoolmaster, and the late cook had known it existed. Inside lay a thin, weekly ledger. Lord Wycliffe stepped forward. Nathaniel blocked him. "No," the Duke said. "Let her read it." Clara opened to the current month. 43 children were listed by name. A final daily ration appeared beneath them. W. B. South Wall. Beside the initials was a small mark, shaped like an arrow. Thomas forced himself upright. The old drain. Clara turned. "What?" "There is a disused drainage passage beneath the south wall. The children found it last spring. I sealed the school end because it led toward the abandoned dower house." Nathaniel stood. "That house has been empty for 20 years. Then why has someone delivered food in its direction every day?" Clara asked. Lord Wycliffe removed one glove. A pale scar crossed the back of his right hand. Thomas saw it. His face drained of colour. "That is not the man who struck me," he said. Wycliffe smiled. Clara understood immediately. Thomas had protected the truth. If he identified Wycliffe in a room controlled by the Duke's footman, he might not survive another hour. Clara shut the ledger. "Thomas requires a surgeon from the village. Dr. Morrow is already here," Wycliffe said. "He will not touch him. Sec, you would risk this man's life to satisfy your suspicion. I am protecting his life because of it." Nathaniel looked from Thomas to Wycliffe's scar. "Did you see the attacker clearly?" Thomas met Clara's eyes. "Clearly enough to know he will come back for anything he failed to find." It was not an identification, but it was a promise to testify when he was safe. Clara handed the ledger to Nathaniel. "You wanted proof that the 44th ration existed. Hold it yourself." He accepted it. For the first time, evidence connected to their son rested in his hands rather than hers. Clara rose. "I am going to the dower house." Nathaniel closed the ledger. "We are going together." Lord Wycliffe moved toward the door. "I will send men ahead." "No," Clara and Nathaniel said at the same time. Their eyes met. The old intimacy of agreement lasted less than a second, but it wounded Clara more deeply than anger. Nathaniel turned to his footman. "Remain here. Guard the schoolmaster and the ledger. No one enters except the village surgeon." He looked directly at Wycliffe. "That includes you." Wycliffe's expression hardened. "You are allowing a distressed woman to direct you into a trap." Nathaniel faced him. "If it is a trap, I will discover who prepared it." Clara took a lantern from the wall. As she passed Thomas, he caught her sleeve. "The boy may not know who he is," he whispered. "Do not frighten him with the truth." Clara nodded. That warning frightened her more than the dark passage waiting beneath the school. The drainage tunnel was barely high enough for Nathaniel to stand. Clara walked ahead with the lantern while he carried a pistol. The air smelled of damp stone and wood smoke. Halfway through the passage, they found Miriam's torn shawl. There was blood on one corner. Clara picked it up. She came this way. Nathaniel examined marks in the mud. 3 adults. One was dragged. And one? He pointed toward a smaller set of footprints. A child had walked beside them. Clara pressed a hand against the wall. For 3 years, she had imagined her son beneath a churchyard stone. Now his footprints lay in the mud before her, close enough to touch. Nathaniel reached toward her. She stepped away before his hand found her shoulder. "You do not get to comfort me yet." His arm fell. "I know." It was the first honest answer he had given her that night. They continued until the tunnel ended beneath a wooden hatch. Voices sounded above them. Miriam was pleading with someone. Then a child began to cry. Clara climbed the steps. Nathaniel caught her skirt. "Wait. That is my son." "It may be. You have doubted him for 3 years. I will not make him wait while you do it again." She pushed open the hatch. The abandoned dower house was not abandoned. A small bed stood beside the cold fireplace. Wooden animals lined the mantel. A boy's blue coat hung from a peg, and beside it rested a pair of boots, recently covered in mud. Miriam sat tied to a chair. A masked man stood behind her with a knife. Near the far wall, a little boy clutched a carved wooden horse against his chest. He had Nathaniel's dark eyes. The masked man seized the child. Nathaniel raised his pistol. "Release him." The boy stared at the Duke without recognition. Then he looked at Clara. His frightened gaze settled upon the silver chain around her neck, the chain that had once held the miniature portrait she wore during her confinement. The boy touched an identical chain beneath his shirt. "Mama Clara?" he whispered. Nathaniel's pistol lowered by an inch. Clara could not breathe. The masked man pulled the child toward the rear door. Let us leave, he warned, or the Blackmoor heir dies before his father admits he ever lived. Clara took one step forward. The masked man pressed the knife against the boy's throat. Nathaniel raised the pistol again. If you harm him, you will not leave this room alive. You cannot shoot me without striking the child. Then tell me what you want. The school ledger and the baptism records. The records are gone, Clara said. Your men took them. The man's eyes shifted toward her. It was a small reaction, but it revealed enough. He had attacked the school. He did not know where the chest had been taken afterward. You lost Miriam, Clara continued. You searched the school and found nothing. Now you are using the child to recover what your employer believes I still possess. Be silent. Lord Wycliffe should have chosen a man who could count. The knife moved away from the boy's throat. Only an inch. Clara threw Miriam's shawl toward the lantern. The cloth struck the flame, plunging the room into darkness. Nathaniel fired. The shot shattered a window. The boy screamed. Clara rushed toward the sound, found the child's shoulders and pulled him to the floor. A body struck the table behind her. Nathaniel cursed as the masked man drove him against the wall. Clara covered the boy with her own body. Stay down. The child clung to her. The masked man ran through the rear door. Nathaniel followed, but Clara heard a horse gallop away before he reached the yard. He returned with blood along his temple. Are you hurt? Clara did not answer. She was staring at the boy beneath her arms. He could not have been more than 3. His dark hair had been cut unevenly, and fear had made his entire body tremble. Clara touched his cheek. What is your name? Will. Who told you to call me Mama Clara? The boy pointed toward Miriam. The old woman remained bound to the chair. Clara freed her. I showed him your portrait, Miriam explained. The woman who cared for him carried it inside her locket. What woman? Mrs. Fletcher, the school cook. The woman who had died 6 months earlier. The woman who had protected the 44th ration. Nathaniel knelt beside the child. Will, look at me. The boy buried his face against Clara's shoulder. Nathaniel stopped reaching. Clara felt his rejection as though it belonged to her. You cannot demand affection from a child who has never been allowed to know you, she said. Nathaniel looked at the floor. I know. Do you? A carriage approached outside. Miriam gripped Clara's sleeve. They found us. Nathaniel moved to the shattered window. 6 mounted men surrounded the dower house. Lord Wycliffe stepped down from the first carriage. Beside him stood the county magistrate. Lady Margaret and Dr. Morrow emerged from the second. They came prepared, Clara said. Nathaniel touched the pistol at his side. So are we. No. They arrived with legal authority and a physician. Your weapon will only help them call us dangerous. The front door opened. Wycliffe entered without knocking. His gaze moved directly to the boy. Relief appeared on his face before he concealed it. The magistrate followed. Your Grace, he said to Nathaniel, we received a report that your wife abducted a tenant's child and intended to present him as the Blackmoor heir. Clara stood. Who made the report? Lady Margaret entered. I did. Nathaniel stared at her. You knew about this house. I knew Clara had been visiting it. That is a lie, Clara said. Margaret opened her reticule and removed 3 folded receipts. Payments from the Duchess's private trust to Mrs. Fletcher. 1 payment every month for 3 years. Clara recognized her own signature. She had approved money for additional food, blankets, and school repairs. The descriptions beneath the amounts had been changed. Where she had written winter provisions, someone had added the words for the maintenance of WB. You altered those receipts. The ink appears identical, Margaret replied, because the person who changed them had access to my account books. Nathaniel looked toward the receipts. Margaret had taken control of the school only hours earlier, yet she already carried documents from its locked office. Clara turned to him. You gave her access. His face tightened. The consequence of his announcement stood before them in Lady Margaret's gloved hands. Wycliffe addressed the magistrate. The Duchess lost a child 3 years ago. Grief can create powerful delusions. Mrs. Bell witnessed the birth, Clara said. Care. All eyes turned toward Miriam. Dr. Morrow stepped forward. Miriam Bell was dismissed from medical service for theft and intoxication. I stole nothing, Miriam replied. You disappeared after receiving £200. I was paid to remain silent, or paid for your involvement in an abduction. Miriam recoiled. The physician turned to Nathaniel. "I warned your father that the woman was unstable." "My father authorized the payment?" Nathaniel asked. Wycliffe answered before Morrow could. "Your father attempted to prevent scandal after Mrs. Bell threatened the family." Clara saw how easily they worked together. One supplied the accusation, the other gave it the appearance of medical truth. The magistrate approached the boy. "What is your full name?" "Will." "Will what?" The child looked at Miriam. "Bell." Wycliffe spread his hands. "There is your answer." Clara knelt beside the boy. "May I look beneath your collar?" Will nodded. She gently pulled the fabric aside. A crescent-shaped mark rested beneath his left shoulder. Nathaniel stared at it. "I never saw that mark," he said. "Because Dr. Morrow removed the child before you entered my room." Morrow adjusted his silver spectacles. "Many children have birthmarks, but only one was baptized William Nathaniel Blackmoor on the night recorded in those registers." "Registers no one can now produce," Wycliffe said. Clara looked at Miriam. "Where is the chest?" "I do not know. The men dragged me into the tunnel before they searched the rear yard." The magistrate sighed. "Without a record or a living clergyman who witnessed the baptism, the child's identity cannot be established tonight." "Then protect him until it can be," Clara said. "I intend to." The magistrate reached for Will. The boy screamed and clung to Clara's dress. "No." She wrapped both arms around him. "He remains with me." Wycliffe looked toward Nathaniel. "Your Grace, this is precisely the danger we feared. Your wife has attached herself to an unknown child. If this story reaches London, every claimant to Blackmoor will use it against you." "He is not unknown," Clara said. "His food has been charged to this estate for 3 years." Ah, and by your own account," Margaret replied. Nathaniel looked at the altered receipts again. Clara saw doubt returning. Not doubt in Wycliffe, doubt in her. "Nathaniel, look at the timing," she said. "Margaret obtained those papers after you gave her my school. The archive burned minutes later. Thomas was attacked. Miriam was taken. This is not grief. It is a chain of deliberate acts." Wycliffe spoke quietly. "The Duke must decide whether he trusts a lifetime of loyal service or a frightened woman constructing a fantasy around a tenant child." Clara faced her husband. "Do not answer him. Go to the school. Examine the original trust ledger hidden beneath the floorboard in my office. Compare it with Margaret's receipts." Margaret's face changed. Nathaniel saw it. Clara knew he saw it. For one moment, the truth stood open before him. Then the magistrate removed a document from his coat. "This order places the boy in temporary custody at the county orphan house. It also authorizes a physician to determine whether her grace poses a danger to herself or others." Clara read the signature line. Nathaniel had not yet signed it. Wycliffe offered him a pen. "End this before the scandal destroys Blackmoor." Clara held Nathaniel's gaze. "If you sign that paper, they will separate me from my son again. We do not know that he is our son. You know enough to investigate. And while I investigate, what am I to do with a child you refuse to release? Protect him. From whom?" Clara looked at Wycliffe. "From the man holding your pen." Silence filled the room. Nathaniel's hand hovered above the document. He could order the school accounts examined. He could detain Wycliffe. He could refuse to place Will in the hands of strangers. Instead, he looked at the magistrate, the physician, and the nobleman who had guided him since boyhood. Then he signed. Clara did not cry. Something colder than grief settled inside her. 2 officers stepped toward Will. The child wrapped his arms around her neck. "Mama Clara, don't let them take me." Nathaniel flinched. Clara held the boy more tightly. "You will have to tear him from my arms." The officers hesitated. The magistrate showed them the order. Nathaniel turned away as they pulled Will from her. The boy screamed her name until the carriage door closed. Miriam began to weep. Clara remained on her knees. Lady Margaret collected the altered receipts and placed them back inside her reticule. "The school will be closed tomorrow," she said. "Its records must be examined for further evidence of fraud." Nathaniel turned sharply. "You will do no such thing. You transferred its patronage to me before witnesses." Clara rose. Margaret was right. By replacing his wife publicly, Nathaniel had given Wycliffe's daughter access to the school, its accounts, and every child who might have seen Will. His signature had now placed the boy beyond Clara's protection. Wycliffe's men no longer needed to burn records in secret. They possessed the authority to remove them in daylight. Clara faced Nathaniel. "You asked what you were protecting him from." Her voice did not tremble. "You have just given them the answer." Outside, the carriage carrying Will turned east. The county orphan house lay west. Nathaniel saw it. This time, he could not pretend it was a grieving woman's delusion. He ran for the door. Lord Wycliffe calmly drew Nathaniel's signed order from the magistrate's hand. "You may follow the carriage," he said, "but if you interfere with it, you will be violating your own command." Nathaniel stopped. Clara did not. She seized the lantern from the table and stepped into the darkness after her son. For the first time since their marriage, she was no longer trying to make her husband believe her. She was preparing to defeat the consequences of his choice without him. Clara reached the stable yard before Nathaniel caught up with her. "You cannot follow that carriage alone. You cannot stop it at all. I signed a temporary custody order. I did not authorize anyone to take the boy east." "You signed a paper you did not read carefully enough." The accusation landed because it was true. Nathaniel ordered 2 horses saddled. Clara mounted without waiting for assistance. "The east road divides near the tenant chapel," she said. "If they intend to hide him, they will avoid the toll gate. I know my own estate." "Then you should have known there was a child living beneath its walls." She rode away before he could answer. They found the magistrate's carriage less than a mile from Blackmoor. It stood abandoned beside the road. One door remained open. The officer who had taken Will lay unconscious in the grass, and the driver had been tied to a tree. Clara dismounted. "Where is the child?" The officer groaned. Nathaniel cut the rope binding the driver. "Who attacked you?" "2 mounted men," the driver gasped. "They carried an order bearing your seal. I issued no second order. They said the boy was to be transferred to St. Jude's infirmary for examination." Clara looked inside the carriage. Will's wooden horse lay on the floor. Beside it rested a strip of white cloth marked with a red stain. She touched it. The stain was not blood. It smelled bitter and sweet. "The medicine," she said. "The same liquid Dr. Morrow gave me after the birth." Nathaniel lifted the cloth. "What did it do to you?" "It made me sleep for hours. When I woke, I could barely remember what I had asked." His face changed. "Did Morrow tell you it was necessary?" "He told me grief had made me dangerous." Clara picked up the wooden horse. One of its wheels had been repaired with a small brass pin. The toy had been held often enough for the paint along its back to disappear. Will had carried it through years in which she believed him dead. Nathaniel reached for the toy. Clara held it away from him. "You do not get to hold this and pretend sorrow makes us equal. I was told he died. So was I. The difference is that when doubt appeared, you chose the people who lied." The driver shifted against the tree. They went north. "The infirmary lies east," Nathaniel said. Clara walked to the road. 2 sets of tracks divided at the road. "Which way?" Nathaniel asked. "East." The driver saw them ride north. "He saw a hunting cart go north," Clara replied. The carriage carrying Will continued east. "How can you be certain?" The eastbound wheels sank deeper. They were carrying more weight. Nathaniel looked toward the road. "St. Jude's lies east." "They are not taking him to St. Jude's." "Then where?" "To the place Dr. Morrow has been sending medicine under a false account." "How do you know?" "Because Dr. Morrow has been billing Blackmoor for medicine delivered somewhere else." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "What medicine?" "Every quarter, the school accounts include 6 bottles of fortified tonic. I approved them for sick children, but Thomas told me the school received only 4, and you did not investigate." "I did. The invoices were corrected each time by your estate office." "Under whose authority?" "Lord Wycliffe's." Nathaniel looked toward the eastern road. "Where were the other bottles delivered?" "The invoices listed East Farm." "That farm was demolished before our marriage." "Yes." They rode. East Farm had become a storage yard, surrounded by a high stone wall. A gatekeeper stepped into the road when Clara and Nathaniel approached. "Open the gate," Nathaniel ordered. The man removed his hat but did not move. "I cannot, Your Grace. This land belongs to Blackmoor." "Not as of midnight." Nathaniel dismounted. "What are you talking about?" The gatekeeper handed him a document. It bore Nathaniel's signature. Clara recognized it as part of the separation agreement placed before her earlier that evening. By signing the custody order, Nathaniel had also affirmed that Lady Margaret temporarily controlled all institutions connected to Clara's disputed trust. East Farm had been listed as school storage property. Nathaniel read the clause twice. I did not agree to transfer this land. The attached schedule says otherwise, Clara replied. There was no schedule attached when I signed. Then someone added it afterward. Nathaniel looked at his seal beneath the final page. A duke's command could move servants, dismiss tenants, and silence a wife. It could not easily undo a signed transfer witnessed by a magistrate. I revoke it, he said. The gatekeeper lowered his eyes. Lady Margaret arrived with county officers. She said anyone obeying you, instead of the written order, would be arrested for trespass. Nathaniel crushed the paper in his hand. The gatekeeper glanced toward Clara. Her ladyship also closed the school kitchen. Clara went still. There are 43 children depending upon it. Food stores were removed an hour ago. Where were they taken? Inside. Clara looked beyond the wall. Wycliffe had not merely seized the school's records. He had taken its winter provisions, knowing she would be forced to choose between pursuing Will and feeding the tenants' children. Nathaniel understood it at the same moment. This happened because I gave Margaret control. Yes, I will purchase replacement food. With what credit? He frowned. Clara handed him the document. Read the final line. All payments from the Blackmoor household were suspended, pending an inquiry into Clara's alleged misuse of the trust. By publicly accusing his wife and transferring her authority, Nathaniel had allowed Wycliffe to freeze the accounts she had kept solvent. The Duke, who owned thousands of acres, could not purchase a loaf of bread in his own name without the approval of the man betraying him. Nathaniel looked toward the gate. What does Wycliffe want? Blackmoor, under his control. He already had my confidence. Confidence can be withdrawn. A signed guardianship cannot. Nathaniel's face lost colour. If Will is declared my heir, and you are declared incapable of managing the estate after tonight's scandal, someone must govern Blackmoor during the child's minority. Wycliffe, or Margaret after becoming your wife. Nathaniel looked at Clara. I never agreed to marry her. You announced that you would replace me. That was enough to make the possibility believable. A child coughed beyond the wall. Clara moved toward the gate. The gatekeeper blocked her. Forgive me, Your Grace. I have orders. Will is inside. I have seen no child. But you heard one. The gatekeeper's face tightened. Clara lowered her voice. 43 children call me their patroness. One may be my son. I will not abandon any of them because men have placed seals upon paper. She removed the silver chain from her neck. It was the final valuable object she still possessed. Take this to the village baker. Tell him Clara Blackmoor personally guarantees payment for enough bread to feed the school for 3 days. Nathaniel stopped her. You should not have to sell your last possession. You sold my authority before I sold the chain. She placed it in the gatekeeper's hand. If the baker refuses, take it to the tenants. They will divide what they have. The man looked at the chain, then at Clara. I do not need it. He opened the gate. The eastern storeroom has a rear entrance. I will keep the officers occupied. Clara touched his arm. You could lose your position. My daughter learned to read at your school. He stepped aside. Clara entered first. Nathaniel followed. The storage yard held dozens of crates marked as school provisions. Behind them stood a black carriage. Dr. Morrow was fastening the door. Nathaniel drew his pistol. Step away. Morrow froze. Clara reached the carriage and looked inside. Will lay across the seat, unconscious. A red-labelled bottle rested beside him. She opened the door. The boy's skin was hot, and his breathing came too slowly. What did you give him? A sedative, Morrow answered. He became violent. He is 3 years old. He was distressed. Because you abducted him. Morrow looked toward Nathaniel. I followed the magistrate's order. The order named the county orphan house, Nathaniel said. Not this place. Lord Wycliffe authorized a medical transfer. Lord Wycliffe is not the boy's father. No, Clara said, but you gave him the power to act as though he were. Nathaniel flinched. Clara lifted Will from the carriage. His head fell against her shoulder. Wake up, she whispered. Please, darling, open your eyes. He did not respond. For the first time since finding him, Clara's control broke. She pressed her face into his hair. I lost you once because I was too weak to leave my bed. I will not lose you while I can still stand. Nathaniel approached. What does he need? The truth from the man who drugged him. He aimed the pistol at Morrow. What was in the bottle? The physician said nothing. Nathaniel pulled back the hammer. Morrow swallowed. Enough laudanum to keep him asleep until morning. Clara looked at the child's shallow breathing. How much? Morrow named the dose. It was nearly twice what a child of Will's size should have received. Help him, Nathaniel ordered. I require my medical case. Where is it? Lord Wycliffe took it to the river warehouse. Why? Morrow looked toward the gate. A horn sounded in the distance. Once, then twice. His expression changed to relief. Clara understood. The transfer had never been intended to end at East Farm. They are moving the records by river, she said. Morrow remained silent. And Miriam? Still nothing. Nathaniel pressed the pistol against the physician's chest. Answer her. The midwife and the chest are aboard Wycliffe's barge. Clara held Will tighter. When does it leave? At dawn. The eastern sky was already beginning to pale. Morrow looked at the unconscious child. The antidote is in my case. If you want the boy awake before the barge reaches the county boundary, you have less than 1 hour. Nathaniel turned toward Clara. The river warehouse lay 4 miles away. The village surgeon was 3 miles in the opposite direction. Clara could pursue the records that might prove Will's identity, or carry him toward the only other physician who might save him. Wycliffe had designed the choice carefully. Nathaniel reached for the child. I will take him to the surgeon. You go to the river. Clara stepped back. No, you cannot do both. I know. Then trust me with him. She looked at the man who had signed their son into the hands of his enemies less than an hour earlier. No, she repeated. You may recover the proof if you wish to save your title. She adjusted Will against her shoulder. I am going to save my child. Clara carried Will 3 miles through the paling darkness. The gatekeeper offered her a horse, but the boy's breathing was too shallow to risk the violent motion of a gallop. She took the farm cart instead and laid him across her lap while the gatekeeper drove toward the village. Every few moments, she pressed her fingers against his throat. Each weak pulse felt like a promise that might be withdrawn. Stay with me, she whispered. You do not have to know who I am yet. Just stay. Will's eyelids did not move. Clara held the wooden horse against his small hand. The village surgeon opened his door before the cart had fully stopped. He took one look at the child and called for hot water. What was he given? Laudanum. Dr. Morrow admitted the dose. How much? Clara told him. The surgeon's expression became grim. Bring him inside. Clara followed the man into a narrow treatment room. She answered every question she could and refused to leave when he began working over the child. After several minutes, the surgeon looked at her. If you continue holding him that tightly, I cannot help him breathe. Clara released Will. Her arms felt empty at once. She stepped backward until she struck the wall. For 3 years, she had imagined that she had already survived the worst thing a mother could endure. Now, she understood that grief had not made her stronger. It had merely taught her how much another loss would destroy. The surgeon worked until dawn broke across the window. At last, Will coughed. Clara covered her mouth. The child turned his head and vomited onto the cloth beneath him. Good, the surgeon said. That is good. Will began to cry. It was a weak, exhausted sound. To Clara, it was more beautiful than every song performed in Nathaniel's ballroom. She moved beside him. Mama Clara, I am here. He reached for her hand. She gave it to him. The surgeon checked the child's pulse again. He is not safe yet, but the danger is passing. Clara bowed her head over Will's fingers. Thank you. Do not thank me until he wakes properly. A knock sounded at the front door. Clara stiffened. The surgeon noticed. Are you expecting someone? Only people who believe they have the right to take him. The surgeon closed the treatment room door. Then they may explain that belief to the village. Voices rose outside. Not officers. Tennell, the gatekeeper, had spread word that Clara's son had been found and poisoned. Men and women from the estate gathered around the surgeon's house, carrying lanterns, tools and loaves of bread from their own kitchens. The baker entered with Clara's silver chain in his hand. I will not accept this. The school needs food. The school will have food. My accounts have been frozen. Bread does not require a duke's permission. He placed the chain beside Will's wooden horse. Clara looked toward the people outside. She had spent years protecting them quietly, never imagining that they had noticed every rent she corrected, every widow she defended, and every winter meal she funded. Blackmoor House was no longer a safe place for her, but Blackmoor's people were offering her something Nathaniel had taken away, a place from which she could act. Nathaniel returned shortly after sunrise. His coat was wet, and blood darkened one cuff. Miriam walked beside him. Clara rose when she saw the old woman. "Did you recover the records?" Nathaniel looked toward Will before answering. "The barge left before we reached the warehouse. I followed it along the northern bank. And Wycliffe's men threw the chest into the river." Clara closed her eyes. "Then everything is gone." "Not everything." Miriam reached beneath her coat and removed a package wrapped in oilcloth. "I took one register from the chest before the men entered the school." She placed it in Clara's hands. The paper inside was damp around the edges, but readable. William Nathaniel Blackmoor, lawful son of Nathaniel, Duke of Blackmoor, and Clara, Duchess of Blackmoor. The baptism had been witnessed by Miriam and signed by the estate chaplain. Nathaniel stared at the name. "Why did you not show me this earlier?" "Because I watched you sign the boy away, while his mother begged you to wait." He lowered his eyes. Miriam continued, "Your title has taught you to expect truth on command. Trust does not work that way." Nathaniel accepted the rebuke without defending himself. Clara examined the register. "The chaplain died 2 years ago, but his signature can be compared with the parish books," Miriam said. "If those books survived the fire," Thomas's voice came from the doorway. A bandage covered his forehead, and the kitchen maid supported one arm. "They did." Clara hurried toward him. "You should be lying down." "So should you." He held up a small key. The parish copies were never stored in the estate archive. Mrs. Fletcher kept them beneath the school chapel after she realized someone had removed Will's page from the official register. Why did she not tell me? She feared the person watching the boy would kill him if anyone searched too closely. Nathaniel looked at Thomas. "You knew a child was being hidden." "I knew someone collected food. I did not know who he was until Mrs. Fletcher became ill." "And you said nothing?" "She made me swear that I would wait for Miriam." Nathaniel's anger rose. Clara stepped between them. "Do not punish another person for protecting the son you failed to protect." His anger disappeared as quickly as it had come. "You are right." The words came without qualification. Clara had waited years to hear them. They brought no comfort now. Thomas placed the key in her hand. "The chapel book contains the chaplain's copy of the baptism." Clara closed her fingers around it. "Then we have 2 matching records kept in separate places." "And a witness," Miriam said. "And the food accounts," Thomas added. Nathaniel looked toward the room where Will slept. "What do you need from me?" Clara studied him. "Not what shall we do? What do you need from me?" It was the first time he had offered to serve rather than command. "You will make no decisions about Will without my consent." Nathaniel nodded. "You will revoke Margaret's authority over the school in front of the same guests who witnessed you give it to her." "Yes." "You will provide the magistrate with a written statement admitting that you signed the custody order without examining the school accounts." His face tightened. Such a statement could be used to challenge his judgment and weaken his political position. Clara waited. "Yes," he said. "And you will not ask me to return to Blackmoor House." The final condition wounded him most. "I understand." "No, you accept. Understanding may take longer." He looked at her for a long moment. "I accept." Clara handed the oilcloth package to Thomas. "Take Miriam and the 2 records to the chapel. Ask the surgeon and the baker to witness when the second register is opened. Write down every person who touches either document." Nathaniel looked at her. "You are creating a chain of custody." "I am preventing Wycliffe from claiming that I wrote the records myself." "I should have known you would think of that." "You should have known many things about me." He did not answer. By mid-morning, the village school had reopened inside the tenant chapel. Bread filled the kitchen shelves. Will slept in a small room above the sanctuary, while 2 tenant mothers guarded the stairs. Clara sat at a plain wooden table, comparing the surviving accounts. Miriam identified the payments used to keep Mrs. Fletcher silent. Thomas traced the 44th ration through 3 years of kitchen books. Nathaniel wrote his statement in front of the surgeon and the baker. When he finished, he handed the page to Clara. She read it. He had not softened his actions. He admitted that Clara asked him to delay the separation announcement. He admitted that he refused. He admitted that he signed the custody order, despite seeing Margaret react to evidence connecting her father to Miriam's payment. At the end he had written, My wife's warning was reasonable. My rejection of it was a choice. Clara looked at him. That sentence may cost you your seat in Parliament. It should cost me something. It will not purchase forgiveness. I know. She folded the statement and gave it to Thomas. A child called from upstairs. Clara immediately rose. Will stood at the top of the steps in a borrowed nightshirt. Mama Clara. She crossed the room and lifted him. His arms went around her neck. Nathaniel remained beside the table. Will looked at him. Is that the angry man? Clara felt Nathaniel flinch. Yes, she answered gently. But he will not hurt you. Nathaniel's voice was rough. No, I will not. Will studied him. Then he hid his face against Clara's shoulder. Nathaniel turned away. His remorse was no longer an elegant emotion experienced in private. It was a child fearing him because of a decision he had signed in public.